Great. Thank you all for coming and welcome to the Gray Associates Demand Trend webinar, designed specifically for community college professionals. This is not your average webinar. It's an opportunity to gain insights into labor market data for program evaluation and use data to debunk common myths about community college programs. We have with us Bob Atkins, who is not only Gray's CEO, but also a program evaluation expert and best-selling author among higher ed publications. There are a few housekeeping items to get started with. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a place labeled Q&A. Please feel free to add your questions there. We will get to as many as we can during the session, and we'll follow up later with you if we run out of time. And have you been wondering about launching a particular new program or what the potential job market looks like for your students? At the end of Bob's presentation, we will give you the opportunity to review programs in real time with PES and our Gray wonderful analyst here. You can pop your program requests into the Q&A at any time during the presentation. And now, without further ado, I will turn things over to our CEO and founder, Bob Atkins.
Thank you very much, Marianne, and welcome everybody. It's great to have you, and I very much appreciate the time you're taking out of what are very busy days. I hope it's calming down a little bit after graduation now, and you have some time to enjoy things like this webinar. So without further ado, I wanted to share with you where all this data comes from. It's actually the product of a program evaluation system, or PES, you'll hear me refer to. And in that system, we assemble a great deal of data about markets. Student demand would be in markets, employer demand, competition, and an estimate of what the appropriate degree level is for a program. Then markets feed margins. You know, if it's a good market, chances are you can run a high margin program. Why do you care about margins? Because you need them in order to fund your mission. And oftentimes we need high margin programs to fund other lower margin programs that are central to the mission of the institution. So a cross subsidy, if you will, a web of cross subsidies is really at the heart of a good program portfolio. By the way, that doesn't mean we should be running unprofitable programs that are not central to the mission. But generally speaking, there are very few of those out there. Then we have academic standards. What percentage of students are actually graduating from school? Are we having trouble with students getting D's, F's, or W's? You hear me refer to the DFW rate, or withdrawing from their courses. Finally, of course, mission. Is the program in fact aligned with the mission of the institution? And it's possible to assemble data on all those things. Today, we'll be sharing data specifically from our market software that identifies trends in student demand, employment, and competition. But a program evaluation system, is really more than just data. In addition to the data, you have to wrap around it the right people and process so that you can arrive at decisions relatively quickly. That's faster than most colleges can now. But in addition to that, have them data informed and bring the judgment of your team to the problem. There's no algorithm to do this yet. You still need people, you need judgment. And importantly, in higher education, we need the participation of faculty and administrators to make good decisions, comply with accreditation requirements for faculty participation, and get it done quickly. An open participative process actually works faster than a top-down process or a more traditional process where ideas are just fed into a fairly amorphous process flow. And we really don't get an answer for 12 to 18 months. And in today's markets, that's just too slow. The opportunities don't really come and go, but the best of an opportunity may have passed within that kind of time frame. So as Marianne mentioned, I'm going to do my presentation, but at the end, there'll be time for us to look at individual programs that may be of interest to you. So please feel free to put those in the Q&A as we go, or just tell us at the end, and we'll be glad to look at that program. We'll do it at the national level. It's too slow to do it locally. The systems take a minute to update to each market. So we'll stick to national for now. Now, in terms of agenda, we'll talk about what's going on with student demand. Then we'll turn to employment, program of the month, and then we'll provide a summary and go to the programs that you want to look at. On student demand, there are really three kinds of indicators. Two that look forward-ish, and one that's not so forward-ish. So when we're thinking about where the market's going, Google's probably your best indicator. because folks in there are looking for programs or courses that they're going to take 6 to 12 months from now, maybe a little sooner, but certainly they're not in them or they wouldn't be looking for them. Enrollment tells us what they're actually in now, and we're fortunate in that data updates 3 times a year, so it's very current. That last little figure there is iPads, and it's kind of wandered in the other direction. iPads is actually the most recent data is still 2021, and then that's tracking completions. They don't provide enrollment in iPads by academic programs, so it's no help to you in program decisions. But it's a help, it's just old. So 2021 is the most current data, but then you have to remember it's completion. So they pick their program or major 2 to 4 years before that, depending on how fast they went through school. So we're really looking at data that's back to 2019. And in 2023, that's getting to be pretty old. It's really not telling you much about trends in student demand at that point. Still a reasonably good indicator of how big a program is, because that doesn't change all that fast. But it's not a very good indicator of what's currently growing or shrinking, or might do so in the future. So let's take a look at a future-oriented metric, Google search volumes by academic program. We track about 900 programs. They comprise about 90% of all completions in the United States. And we do about 20 keywords per program, depending a little bit on how many keywords there really even are available for each program. So with that, we can see whether demand for higher ed and individual programs is rising or shrinking. And we share that with you for each of 3 years. The black line is 2021, the blue is 2022, and the green here is 2023. So you've got 3 years of data. What we're hoping for is that the black line is lower than the blue line, which is lower than the green line. That would mean it's been growing for 3 years straight. We do get a disproportionate number of programs that are, or trends that are doing that, because 2021 was COVID, of course. So that artificially depressed demand. And we've got some relatively low numbers to anniversary in 2022. And 2023, as you can see, has been running ahead. It's been running ahead of all this year, and this month is no exception. It was up 3%. We are seeing a decline month over month, but I think that's mostly seasonality. January is almost always the biggest month of the year, and you can see that is likely to be the case here. And then it drops off as we get closer and closer to the beginning of the summer when we get another little burst. What is growing? Well, in terms of programs, in more of the certificate area, sterile processing led the list. In fact, we have 5 healthcare programs on this list: sterile processing, health and medical administrative services, health information records tech, MRI tech, and medical billing and coding. We have a few career and technical education programs as well: electrician, diesel mechanics, cooking, and HVAC. I'll pick on this diesel mechanics trend here for a moment. It's a wonderful program, assuming that all our trucks don't get turned to electric anytime soon, which I think is safe bet we got another 10 years there. Maybe not 20, but 10. It's a wonderful program, well-paid field, and diesel mechanics want to tell you that they can work anywhere in the world, and it's pretty true, because there's a truck or a generator pretty much anywhere in the world. And if they're diesel, then they'll need to be maintained. And maintained better than the diesel backup generator was in the store that I used to run, which ran perfectly except when the power went out, in which case it didn't run at all. Recent trends, let's take a look now at enrollment. I'm not as happy a picture in enrollment, so I'm hoping that Google's just a little ahead of itself. We look at enrollment trends, it's been dropping. The pace of the decline slowed a little bit from 12% we went into COVID to 3%. Now we're back at 3% after a little bit of a respite in 2022. So that's not wonderful. And I hope that Google is telling us that that's likely to pick up as we look forward. Associate programs, a lot more volatile. We had a big drop as we went into COVID, big pickup in 2021, then another sudden drop, getting us back to the more traditional level there around 326, and a little bit of a drop again in 2023. So not a lot of good news on the enrollment front. I thought this problem was a little bit past us and that we were finally beginning to flatten out here, but that does not appear to be the case. I hope for all of your sakes that you're not experiencing this right now and that your enrollment actually continues to grow or has begun growing again. A few of my clients have seen that, and as I say, I hope that's true for all of you as well. Certificates, what's been going on here in terms of growth and just overall size? Pretty interesting that we've got 3 core career and technical education programs in our top 10. Welding actually was the largest program in new enrollment in spring, with almost 5,300 new enrolled students. Auto mechanics didn't do too badly either, with 2,900 students approximately, and HVAC maintenance tech with 2,800. So these are, I would call them sort of classic career and technical education programs with very strong new enrollment. We have a couple of, well, more than a couple. We have 5 healthcare programs on here: nursing, medical clinical assistant, licensed vocational nurse, EMT, and medical billing and coding. That's often the case. We had a month or two there when they weren't running, five or six of the top 10, but they're back, and they're back in a big way. And we have a couple of business programs, business admin and management general, and bookkeeping, that also made the top 10. Business, of course, is up here, the number 2 slot. Business and nursing are normally the 2 contending for first place. As I mentioned, this month they were outdone by welding. So when we look at the certificate level, story's a little bit different. We've still got some healthcare. 3 of the top 10 are healthcare programs. We've got a lot of other 4 programs here, sort of miscellaneous: interdisciplinary studies, business, early childhood education and teaching, and bookkeeping and accounting tech. So again, that business and bookkeeping on both charts, so both large and growing quickly. Career and technical education, commercial truck drivers are doing really well, up 9%. Cosmetology is up 7%, and welding is not only large, it's growing quickly at 6%. Now we look at the associate level. We see business admin and management, which is both a certificate and an associate program, the largest by far in new enrollment, with 25,000 students approximately. Registered nursing is number 2. So here we are returning true to form with those 2 in the number 1 and 2 slot. Computer science and psych are often vying for 3 and 4, and here they are again. Bookkeeping and accounting tech is not only a certificate program, but it's one of the larger programs in terms of new enrollment in spring. Criminal justice, biology, engineering, health services, and then CJ, police science. So if you add those 2 together, criminal justice is actually the 3rd largest area of interest among our programs. So that'd be almost a little over 7,000, almost 8,000 new enrolled students. Fastest growing, cybersecurity. This has been one of the faster growing programs for a while. It is now one of the bigger programs as well. So we're seeing not only a large program, but one that can be large and grow rapidly. So I don't think the bloom is off the rose on this one yet, although many, many schools already offer it. Speech and communication rhetoric up 17%, childcare up 17%. And there's my favorite, history made the list, up 16%. I was a history major, so I'm always rooting for it. And we'll come back to that in a moment. We talk about what jobs there are for history majors. And despite all the stories out there, it turns out there are jobs for history majors. I'm relieved to know that, given that I needed one for all these years. Then we have education and auto tech, up 11%, even at the associates level. I'm a little skeptical of an associates in auto tech, but it appears to be reasonably popular. I worry that's a little bit of overeducation, though there are things that an auto mechanic will go on to do and some technology that they need to learn that's pretty advanced. When I say go on, if you're going to be a service manager, that associate's degree may come in quite handy. Then we have music, general, health services, allied health, computer science, and IT. So it's interesting that these are now dropped back. I think a lot of that demand is coming in up here in cybersecurity. Now, what's going on in the non-degreed courses? These are really your massively open online competitors, MOOCs. I think many of us thought MOOCs had sort of passed by, and we all heard that they were going to kill higher ed. Higher ed did not die. But interestingly, the MOOCs didn't go away either. And I'll share some numbers with you that are really kind of startling. What we're looking at here is Coursera and the individual courses that people enrolled in on Coursera. And all these numbers on this page are the number of students enrolled since these programs were launched, or courses were launched, which in some cases is 5 to 8 years ago. So it's a cumulative number. Science of Wellbeing has been number one on this list for a while. Learning how to learn is number two. When I think of Coursera and especially the other big platform, what is it, Udemy, I think of them primarily as technology. But as you can see on Coursera, that's not entirely true. We've got some things that are non-tech that are still amongst the most popular. In particular, those two, Science of Wellbeing is always leading the list. And Learning how to learn has been very popular. On the data side, we do have a few of those here, 3 of them specifically. Foundations, data everywhere, tech support fundamentals, neural networks and deep learning, and algorithms, part 1. That's actually 4 data and technology programs. Intro to, on the health side, we talked about Science of Wellbeing. We've got psychology and COVID contact tracing as well. And then the random ones, learning how to learn, successful negotiation, and first step Korean. I always find this one interesting. And there are a couple of other languages if we went a little bit deeper. And with the decline in languages on campus across most universities, it's very interesting to see that same decline is not taking place in the MOOCs. There are folks out there interested in languages. I suspect they're adults, non-traditional learners, and their language choices can be fairly eclectic. Chinese, Korean, certainly English, but that's going to be mostly your international students taking that, as well as other languages. So the interest is still there. It's just not showing up in a traditional college. So what's growing fastest? Well, now we get a little techier. Data everywhere comes to the top of the list. I just want you to think about this for a moment. Year over year, unit change in cumulative enrollment. So in April, compared to last April, there are 912,000 new students enrolled in one course on Coursera. That is it's about a fifth of all the students enrolled in college in the United States in terms of size. So these are truly enormous courses. Obviously, they're online, they're completely asynchronous, minimal participation by instructors, if any. I think it can vary by individual course, but nobody's hand-holding 912,000 students, I don't think. So we've, again, sort of thought MOOCs were gone. They are not gone. They're very much alive, and the volumes of students who are at least logging into these things is extremely high. Now, I should say also that an enrollment here is nothing like an enrollment in a college program. I'd say out of the 912,000 students who enrolled, probably 80% of those have attended one class out of that course, and not a whole lot more than that. People drop away very quickly. Many of these are free, and so you cannot really equate it directly with a college enrollment. It's quite different, but still enormous. And they're a great indicator of where student interest is, which is why we share it. If you're thinking about trying to offer a course or a program, a certificate in particular, these are the kinds of things people are really looking for. So you can see number 2 here, Science of Wellbeing. Intro to Psychology is our other health program. I think given all the mental health programs in the United States, we're going to continue to see a lot of interest in psychology at every level. Data and tech, UX, the design of the UX user experience, how to clean data, crash course on Python, and HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. As AI takes off, I think you're going to see more Python because that's the language a lot of the algorithms are managed in. And cleaning data is actually a critical function in data science. That's where data scientists spend about 80% of their time, is actually getting the data clean enough to be able to build a model. The modeling part's actually relatively easy. So that's what's going on Coursera. And again, ideas for you all as you think about adult ed courses in particular and certificates you may want to offer. What skills are folks looking for, and how many of them? Well, Salesforce is one of the courses taught on Coursera, and a very high demand skill. What this is, for all of you who may not be familiar with it, it's a piece of software that sales organizations use to manage their contacts and reach outs to customers. So It's what's called a customer relationship management software. So it's CRM. It's the leader in the field by far. Very, very popular program in many businesses. And a few colleges, not very many of you chosen to use Salesforce. It's a little bit different problem than you have in a regular sales organization. So Salesforce doesn't fit exactly in higher ed. In any case, how many people want it? Well, out of the job postings that we looked at, we've got well over 15,000. They're looking for somebody who has Salesforce skills. You break that down by industry: IT with almost 7,000, healthcare with 4,000, retail still almost 4,000, manufacturing at about 3,000, and education about 3,000. So pretty healthy demand across a variety of industries. Who needs the skills? When we look at the job posting and the job title, general and operations managers. Now it's interesting, these guys aren't actually going to be using it to contact customers. What they're going to be doing is monitoring their sales operations through it and seeing how active their salespeople are and whether they're meeting quotas and so forth. Obviously, sales reps, sales managers, marketing managers, and interesting retail salespeople as well need Salesforce skills. So it's an interesting course to think about at a college, to have people be able to graduate with this kind of a skill. It's not a major for sure, but it could be a course. It could be an adult ed course in particular. Now let's take a look at what's happening in the job market. First thing to remember when we look at jobs is that graduates don't do what they're supposed to do. I like to think of it as, these are not rabbits. They don't go into a particular hole that we all think they should. For 78% of programs, less than 20% of graduates will go into the fields for which they're directly prepared. The big exception, nursing. There are one or two others. Accounting is pretty high. Nursing, we see, over 60%. That's one of the 2% here. Over 60% of students will actually go on to become nurses. But for 78% of programs, less than 20% of the graduates are actually going to go into the field that they've studied for. So history majors don't become historians. Let's take an example here of art or art studies. If we look at direct prep, which has been a traditional way of evaluating jobs for programs and remains legally required if you're a for-profit, very distorted view of the world though. They would say that for art and art studies, there are only 5 majors for which students are directly prepared: art, drama, and music teachers, craft artists, fine artists, photographers, and secondary school teachers. And interesting, this isn't as off as some of them are, history in particular, I keep track of. But instead of 5 programs, when you look at what fields art majors go into, it turns out they go into 500 fields, not 5. Now, of course, here we can see it's not as bad as some. Art and related workers, yeah, that makes sense. Elementary school teachers, they mentioned, probably teaching art. Graphic designers, oops, they missed that in the what people are directly prepared for. But I can't think of better preparation for graphic design than learning art. Managers, interestingly, maybe managers in creative organizations, but I'm guessing there are a lot of people who study art who then go on to do other things and rise into management roles. Post-secondary teachers, designers, retail sales, not so great. That means that they are not able to do much with their degree. As all of you know, you don't need a college degree really to be a retail salesperson. So that's could be somebody who's taking a career break, but not a great sign of the job market for this particular major. Secondary school teachers, first line, so managers of retail sales workers and other teachers. So quite a lot of teaching going on here. And unfortunately, a fair amount of low skill retail work going on as well. But some pretty interesting things in addition. And remember, this is just the top 10 of that 502. So there are lots of other things that people with an art degree can go do in their career. There's a very widespread fallacy that people just do what they're supposed to do, if you will, or what they're trained for. In history, it's almost the same numbers, the 5 direct prep fields, over 500 that history majors go into. History majors actually do a little better here in terms of income. We make over $100,000 a year, 80th percentile. The art majors are at 60,000, which is about the median U.S. income. So it's not great for somebody with a college degree. So this isn't one of the higher earning fields, if you will. But many other academic programs prepare you for a wide variety of things. And many cases also require grad school. If you think of the history major, Many become lawyers, but to do that, obviously, they have to go beyond the bachelor's degree and get a master's, get a degree in law. All right. Now let's flip the quiz around, if you will, and say, if I'm a general and operations manager, what did I major in? And yeah, we got some business here at the top, but the third ranked program is psychology. Then we have marketing and market research. Yeah, it's kind of related. Communications, that's a bit of a surprise. Hospitality management, yeah. Parks and leisure, I would never have guessed that. Finance, okay. Political science, wouldn't have guessed that. Biology, wouldn't have guessed that either. My point is just that when you think about an occupation like general operations managers, there are a lot of folks with a lot of different backgrounds who end up in those jobs. So again, we can't really pigeonhole people and pigeonhole the majors that they took. They often open up a wide variety of job opportunities. Unfortunately, there are fewer opportunities out there than there used to be. We're in the beginning, I think, of a decline in the job market. April was down 30% year over year. It's down 20% month over month as well. I think it's actually 29% month over month. So, and these bars are starting to get down to pretty low levels. You know, I could have made an argument a while back that last year was really a bounce back from COVID. And so being short of last year didn't mean the economy wasn't in great shape or that there was a shortage of jobs. Now this bar is starting to get low enough that it begins to worry me that we're actually going to start to see issues with job placement again, which we haven't seen in a while. That's good news and bad news for all of you. As you probably know, the enrollment in community colleges and other trade-oriented programs, actually higher ed in general, lines up very closely with a change in the unemployment rate. So when the unemployment rate goes up, enrollment generally goes up. Obviously, it didn't during COVID because we couldn't go to school, but normally that's what happens. And so it could be good news for enrollment if we continue to see the job market soften. But unemployment rates have not started to rise yet. And it'll take a little while for this drop in job postings to work its way through to unemployment. Hard to root for unemployment, but again, probably good for enrollment in community colleges. So where are the jobs? Nursing, as always, number one. Retail sales, largest field of employment in the United States. Hiring, again, still trying to recover from COVID. General and operations managers, computer and user support. We've still got admin assistants being recruited, customer service reps, personal health aides, nursing assistants, social and human service assistants, and maintenance workers general. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of growth in these areas that are directly patient touching or person touching, nursing assistants, social, human services, registered nursing and such. We've got a lot more people that need that kind of care. Demographics are going to continue to favor that for quite some time as the baby boom ages. Fastest growing job postings, payroll and timekeeping clerks. A bit of a surprise to me, but I guess that's really following with the growth in employment that's taken place over the last few years. Social and human service assistants, physical therapist assistants, good growth there. Great program too for people. Locksmiths, bus and truck mechanics, back to that diesel idea. Production planning and expediting, cardiovascular, athletic trainers, very eclectic list of fields that are growing. What soft skills are people looking for? Here are what I would call general requirements. So monitoring, research, the ability to do scheduling, to supervise, to lead, sales skills, operations, planning, customer service, and management. These are broader than what I would call a skill, but they're general areas that people are looking for in their new recruits. When we look at more direct skills and the frequency of mention, diversity awareness, interestingly now, is one of the top skills. 57% of job postings bring it up. Eye contact, constructive feedback, friendliness, assertiveness, socialization, positive reinforcement, learning strategies, body mechanics I found interesting, and fine motor skills. So for your hands-on jobs, these become very important. So what certifications are people asking for? This is pretty consistent over the months. Number one, security clearances. And after that, it's healthcare, healthcare, and healthcare. Nurse, practitioner, licensed practical nurse, certified medical assistant, certified nursing assistant, basic life support certification, and basic cardiac life support. Now, it's not surprising that healthcare has a lot of these certs, as I've mentioned in other meetings. You really hope that the person taking care of you actually is competent. And certainly certification is one of the ways of making sure that they know what they're doing when they try and help you out. So very important there. And you can see there are a couple of other areas: forklift certification, food safety, and ServSafe certification that make the list as well. Now, one of the things I think you really need to keep in mind in community colleges in particular, community colleges tend to look at labor data as if it's all they need in order to make a program decision. That's incorrect. It's not even all the market data you need to make a program decision. You need to understand student demand as well. Otherwise, you get a real mismatch between the programs you offer and what might be very good jobs available on the other side and student interest. And as a result, you'll make the investment in starting a program or maintaining one when there really aren't enough students to fill the classrooms. So on the bottom right-hand side of this chart, you see the better job market are things where the job market's very good. Pay is often good, plenty of jobs, but the level of student demand is lower. So it's not necessarily low, but it's lower than the job opportunities would suggest. In the yellow band are things where that opportunity is pretty well aligned. You can see social work, business, registered nursing, all pretty close in terms of the amount of employer interest and the amount of student interest. But you get to something like operations management and accounting. Let's take accounting as an example. Great field, lots of pay, lots of demand at every level, from that bookkeeping on up to becoming a partner in an accounting firm. So, and long-term jobs, relative job security, all those good things, well paid, but there's not students who want to come in and major in accounting. So again, you got to be a little bit careful that you look at both of these dimensions when you're making program decisions. And you've got the other problem too, where there are programs where there's a ton of student interest, and the job market's not great. So if I took medical assistant, lots of people coming into that program, there are actually a fair number of jobs, but the pay is very low. Culinary arts, same thing, pay lots of interest, but and even a fair number of jobs, but the pay is very, very low for culinary arts. So not getting, the employment opportunity is not nearly as attractive as the students may think it is. So keep that in mind. You got to look at both. Interesting question here with cybersecurity, whether it's still a good employment score, but whether the student demand might be starting to get ahead of the employer opportunity. Personally, I don't think so, just because there's so much work to be done in cybersecurity. I suspect we'll be hiring in that field for years to come. Now let's look at a specific program. And in this case, we're going to take apart the market opportunity for that program. So I mentioned when you're thinking about programs, employment's not good enough. It's just not complete. It's one of several elements that you have to take into account when you're evaluating programs. The other elements are student demand in particular, which I think is co-equal with employment. It doesn't really do the employers any good if you launch a program and they need graduates and you can't recruit any students. So you really need to understand this and have good current data about it. Competition is another important dimension. And finally, degree fit. Is this actually an associate or certificate program, or does it need to be more advanced? We don't want to be giving people a PhD in house painting or an associate's degree in neurosurgery. So we do this, we take into account the program. We generate an overall score looking at some 50 individual metrics. We get a score for student demand, a score for competitive intensity, for jobs, and for degree fit. We also like to percentile and color things. So what's a percentile? Well, we have 1,500 programs in the system. And so the percentile is the percentile rank of that program on a given metric compared to all 1,500 other programs on the same metric. So you can see medical clinical assistant here overall is in the top 2% of all programs in the system. So it's one of the top 30. And you can see it's really driven by student demand at the 99th percentile, one of the top 15 programs in terms of volume of students interested. Competitive intensity, not so great. And finally, the employment percentile is about average at the 54th percentile. Now you notice the colors, dark green, pink, and yellow. Green means it's dark green means it's the 98th percentile or higher. And as you go from that dark green down to pink, the percentiles are dropping. We do that because a lot of numbers. And so the colors allow you to quickly interpret the numbers. And we keep the numbers because there are those who are unable to distinguish, for example, the green color specifically. So we have both the percentile and the color. And between the two, you can really take a look at this page and at a glance understand, for example, as using medical clinical assistant, that most of its overall score is being driven by student demand, but the other two ain't so great. And finally, degree fit, we've actually filtered for programs here that are all a good fit. So that's why you see everything here at 100. They're all a good fit for an associate's or below. Now let's take a look at one program in particular. We're going to take legal assistant paralegal this month. And let's take a look at that in some more detail. First, glance at this and you can see it's pretty green. The only exception is international. Not a surprise. We don't have a lot of international students interested in becoming paralegals. Everything else is light to dark green. So we know immediately that it's a pretty big program. And in fact, Google search volumes at the 94th percentile compared to all 1,500 other programs. We look at student enrollment, it's even better. That's at the 97th percentile. And online completions by students in this particular market, 98th percentile. And finally, total completions online plus on ground, we're up at the 97th percentile. So no question that in terms of student demand, paralegals, one of the bigger, most in-demand programs in the United States at this degree level. Is it growing? Well, that's a very different question, how big it is. And it's interesting how contradictory the data is here. Let me see if I can explain why that's happening. My completion growth year over year is up 8%. New student enrollment, however, is down 19%. And when I take a look at Google, it's up 16%. So what am I supposed to do? And I've got three indicators, and they're all telling me something different. Well, let's remember our timeline on the search information, the student demand information. Completions, old information, right? That's back to 2018 when people decided they wanted to become a paralegal and began their major. So what this 8% is telling us, a while back, a bunch of students entered this program. New student enrollment is telling us right now, that's not so good, not so great. Actually 19% decline in the number of students who entered these programs recently. Google search gives us a little bit more positive look, not so much because it's 16%, but it's looking forward. So it could be that decline in enrollment is actually is reaching its peak, and going forward we may see a resurgence. Can't be certain. When I see three numbers like this, what it tells me in particular is the trend is uncertain. We've got conflicting indicators, and I think realistically this could go any which way. But do remember, what's not uncertain is that it's a very large program. So it's likely to be fine at your institution. It might decline a little bit, but it's likely to stay a pretty large program just because of its overall size. Now, employment, you can at a glance see again here, we don't see as much dark green, a little bit up here in the overall size for direct prep jobs with all the limitations that are around that. Anyway, let me keep going. We've got both job postings and BLS up around the 90th percentile, 328,000 people employed in the field, and some 60,000 job postings right now. So that's about one job posting for every 5 people employed. That's a pretty high need to add to or replace people who are already in the workforce. It is declining a little bit. The BLS historical growth rate's down 0.9%. By the way, I think this is one of the fields where the AI programs, ChatGPT and such, are going to make tremendous inroads. There's a lot of work that might be done by a paralegal that will be able to be done by a machine. I think law in general has a problem with that because it's based on history and the history is written down. That means it can be analyzed by a machine very effectively to find, for example, the cases that might be relevant in a lawsuit. or to search through millions of pages of documents to find the smoking gun, which would normally have to be done by some poor soul reading through all that stuff. That may not be the case in the future. And I think it's, so anyway, it'll be interesting to see whether ChatGPT and other applications begin to affect the legal market in terms of employment. Right now, it's pretty robust. We've got 5.7 jobs for paralegals for every graduate. So we've still got plenty of jobs for them. Pay is kind of miserable. We're down to 18th percentile here, $47,000 a year for the average paralegal. So not a great outcome for somebody with a college degree. And finally, a relatively high number of people in direct prep jobs here at 17%. So many people who study this actually do go into the field, but more likely they're going to go on to get other degrees. 19% get a professional and doctoral degree. Of course, what that most likely is a law degree. So that's the job market. Very competitive program. You won't be the first to think of this if you haven't already got it. 429 folks offer it around the country. It's a pretty small program at most schools. I shouldn't say really small. 77th percentile, it's got 8 completions. But remember, that's going to be over 2 years plus attrition. So that's about 25 students enrolled in that program at any given time. So not tiny, but not particularly large either. Pretty expensive to market. Google cost per click here at $17 is high, 92nd percentile. And the competition index is at the 96th percentile. So if you want to get out there and market this program online, you're going to be up against some pretty stiff competition. That's the kind of thing we look at to say this might be pretty saturated. If you haven't got it, you're a little late to this party. And we've got some online going on here, 113 institutions offering it online. They're actually winning 21% of completion. So this program is pretty popular online. The guys who are online are taking a little bit above their market share in terms of completions. What degree level is appropriate? This is really in the sweet spot for community colleges with, you can see the 49 and 38% of completions nationally are at either the certificate or the associate's level. Who's in the workforce? Some college, associate's degrees, and some bachelor's, but we've got a lot of people here with a little bit of college who are in the field. So you can get in and get a job in this with an associate's degree, perhaps even a certificate. And we put that all together on one page, partly to test your vision. No, more seriously, so that you can see everything in one place. And when you're making a decision, you don't have to hunt around through 2 or 3 systems or a dozen pieces of paper to find the information you need. It also allows you to get, I guess what they taught me was called a gestalt, an impression of this program in one place, especially given the colors. You know immediately that student demand is terrific because it's dark green, employment's good, light green, and my problem is competition, as we discussed. So again, in a few seconds, you can get a high-level view of this, and using your colors, you could quickly identify the other issues, for example, with wages. So having it on one page allows you to look at a program. We've got 50 variables here, and very quickly hone in on what the pluses and minuses are for that program and see how it does overall as well. Now, let me summarize, and then we'll open the floor to get your ideas about programs you'd like to look at. Demand for associate and certificate programs is mixed. Google's up. The fastest rising program, sterile processing tech, up 70%. But we think Google may be a little ahead of itself. New enrollment is still going down and dropped about 3% in spring 2023. Multidisciplinary studies led certificate enrollment. At the associate level, cybersecurity grew the fastest, and it grew at a great pace, 30%. Job postings are down 30% year over year in April and down month over month. So beginning to get worried that the job market is softening. Payroll and timekeeping clerks did really well, up 74%. And legal studies, paralegal programs, the interest is strong. Student demand in particular. So if you've got the program, you should be able to attract students into it, maybe even get it to grow. The demand metrics are all favorable, and the jobs are good. So it is very competitive, though. So the cost of winning new students may be relatively high. And it's not a great program in terms of wages. There's certainly jobs out there, but the career wage is going to be well below the average. And finally, just keep in mind, graduates aren't pigeons. They don't fit in little holes. They actually worked in hundreds of occupations, not just a few niches for which they may have been directly prepared. That's my presentation. I want to invite you, we hear all this gloom and doom out there, and you can see enrollment's down, and people talk about the demographic cliff. By the way, kind of not a real thing. I'll share that with you on another podcast or webinar. Generally speaking, the demographics aren't the problem. They're declining, but they're not declining nearly as fast as enrollment. So there's something else going on out there. I would also tell you that regardless of whether you're a community college, what market you're in, there are folks that have figured out how to grow, and there's no reason for you to shrink. But if you want to grow, you're going to have to start taking on new strategies and being willing to change. The question then becomes, what are those strategies? And so I'm doing some research and have launched a podcast series talking to folks who figured out how to grow colleges. Some of these are small colleges in rural areas. Some of them are big. We'll over time get to all sorts of different schools and give you practical strategies you can use to grow your college. But please, please don't accept it as destiny that you have to shrink. That's just not true. If you act, you can grow, almost regardless of market. And people have come back from near-death experiences. Some of the largest universities in the United States were functionally extinct. The best example is Southern New Hampshire University, which was literally going bankrupt, had a few hundred students up in New Hampshire, and now has over 100,000. So it can be done. Y'all can do it. And I'd be delighted to help gather the information for you so you can learn what the strategies and tactics are that you can use to grow. And that's what the podcast will be about. Obviously, if you point your camera at the codes there, you'll get a link into the podcast, and welcome your participation or listening to it, I guess, since it's tough to participate in a podcast. But if you do have comments or thoughts on it, or you want to learn more, feel free to get in touch with me directly as well. Monica, let me turn it over to you. I'm going to stop sharing and let you present any. Do we have any suggestions for programs?
We have one request so far for allied health.
Great.
That's gonna be 1L.
Yeah, I think that's me, Bob.
Fire away.
Cool. So allied health, I'll go ahead and just share my screen here really quickly. Can everybody see my screen okay? I'll take silence as a yes. Go ahead and click in here. Before I click into allied health, we're going to see the color coding of the system take place here. So it's performing very strongly here overall. And we're going to dive into the scorecard and see where exactly that is the case. As this is loading, you'll start seeing some color coding come in here. It is raining where I'm at, so I think I might have some internet lag going on, but we can see student demand is very strong here for allied health, just at a high level. It seems to be very competitive. And then the employment looks just about middle of the road here at the 67th percentile. Things that stick out here in student demand are the size of student demand seems to be performing very strongly. I'm saying that because I'm focusing here on the dark greens. New student enrollment, on-ground completions, online completions, and some of on-ground and online completions in the national market, all very strong here, above the 98th percentile. Where there seems to be some question is the pinks here associated with the growth. Google search volumes are on a declining trend here, and enrollments
Way off, yeah.
way down here. The most significant change volume here that we see across all programs and these award levels at 3,400.
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, if you think about this again in our sort of what's looking forward and what's looking backwards, the completion volume says this was a good program a few years ago, right? The completions are still high. Both Google and enrollment are saying that's changed a lot and it's declining.
Yep. They'll move over to the right, and we're just seeing just average here. Employment opportunities, especially in a direct prep field here, 53rd percentile job postings. What else do we see here? Some strong wages, I would say.
Yeah.
in the mean in the 10th percentile. And
Clerk
then
and paralegal.
I would just highlight here the 1% indirect prep, which might
I
kind of
think you're really
dissuade
looking at if you look at the BLS current employment in, all the fields that somebody might go into, that ACS bachelor's employment, a lot of jobs out there that somebody can go get with this degree that may not be, precisely aligned with the degree itself.
Correct. So that's a high level student demand, high level employment dive here.
Don't forget competition, because that's really the problem here.
Yeah, we'll get to competition here shortly. Then the system's also going to kind of break down the award levels that this program tends to complete in. Nationally, we can see 51% bachelor's, 32% associates. So if someone said they wanted to start a program at the doctorate level in allied health, we might put a question mark on it. We're not going to completely knock it, but we might just put a question mark on it just because it doesn't really tend to complete at that level. And the workforce isn't really demanding doctorate degrees here for that. Then we can see the competition, and this is really where I think a lot of the score is being knocked down. We're seeing a lot of campuses with graduates, so a lot of other institutions here already in this field, 269 at the 96th percentile. But despite that, average program completions are very large, 42 average program completions. And it doesn't seem to be too expensive relative to all other programs to market this program here.
Yeah, you know what happens here, I think, and it may be affecting the demand as well, is a lot of the students who end up in this program are actually coming from another program, in particular nursing. So they start out trying to get, either trying to get into the formal nursing program in a pre-nursing, when they've started in pre-nursing and they don't make the cut, and they'll often end up in allied health. So it's a funny program. It's a bit of a parachute program for other more demanding healthcare programs. So the demand may not actually be coming from Google. It's coming from someplace else, right? That I think nursing is taking a bit of a hit, which may explain in terms of enrollment volumes, that may begin to explain the declines. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think another program was criminal justice, unless there's another one that people want to see. I think it's this one here, the 4301.
I would encourage, if you're out there, if you have any other questions, please feel free. We've got a little bit of time and would be happy to answer them for you.
So criminal justice is painting a little bit of a different story than the allied health, specifically in the employment side, where we're seeing a little bit more strength here in job posting totals, 91st percentile job posting totals, but the wages seem to be a little lower than the allied health, which is what we were just looking at. Student demand, similar story here. There's a lot of size, so this is a large program in terms of demand. New student enrollment, completions, and Google search volumes are very significant here, all above the 97th percentile. Where the questions start to come are in the growth associated with this student demand, right? Google search volumes are down, enrollments are down significantly as well here. We're seeing a big decrease similar to allied health. Completion volumes are down, enrollment and Google search percentages are down as well here. And then again, a very competitive program, 711 campuses this time, with 31 average program completion. So again, it's a very large program, but it is doing well on the average program completion side, as well as median program completions at the 83rd percentile. The difference here in terms of competition is this is going to be significantly more expensive to market than the allied health program that we were looking at before. Okay.
RN BSN program update. That's actually a little bit tricky, but we can take a crack at it. The reason I say it's tricky is that it's not the zip code gets confused with regular nursing. So we'll we'll do our best to strip it out.
Correct. So, what Bob is saying there is, RN and BSN and all the different types of nursing majors are all going to be grouped into the 513801 zip code. So we won't be able to break it down that way, but we can give you an overview here of how nursing is doing as a whole at the associates and below. Again, lots of jobs here. I'm just going by the color coding, lots of student demand size, right? Enrollments are down. And that's really the only place here where we're seeing some concern in nursing. But because it's already such a large program, you know, the volume might look a little bit more scary than the actual percentage change. But still something to consider here is enrollments are down. This is a huge program nationally, and completes at a very large amount across all the institutions that offer it, whether it's at the average program completion size or the median program completion size. Both are in the 98th percentile here. And again, another program here with lots of competition and, you know, relatively expensive go-to marketing strategies here in the Google search space for sure, with $12 cost per click being at the 85th percentile and a relatively competitive competition index here.
Yeah.
This is going to be one of the programs that has the highest placement in direct prep jobs as well. We're looking at a 79% here. So it's going to be very rare to find anything above that 80% direct prep placement here.
Well, now there's a question from the audience. Any indication as to why enrollments have declined? Blas, I assume that you mean in general as opposed to for nursing, but I'll try it both. So generally speaking, I think there are lots of potential explanations for why enrollment's down. Some of those are, I'm going to put in the category of woe is me. You know, the demographics are bad. And, you know, because of demographics, I can't grow, or the economy is good, so students are getting jobs, which is true. But at the end of the day, the distinction between, I think a lot of the burden comes back to higher education itself. We've let a number of negative messages about higher ed go unchallenged. For example, that it's not worth getting a college degree. There's no payback. That's just not true. It's not approximately true. The earning, I don't have data specifically for associate degrees, but on a 4-year degree, the earning is a difference between a college grad and non-college grad is $1 million over the lifetime, $918,000 specifically. And that's numbers from a pretty reliable source, Georgetown Center for Workforce and Education. Now, as we turn to, and we've just done a terrible job of letting the world know that there are facts and there's fiction. And the facts are that a college education pays and pays well for most people. And even many of the trades people think about as not being college actually require post-secondary education. Welding is a great example. So if you want to make money in the United States, and education still helps. Now in nursing specifically, I think we're seeing all kinds of conflicting things going on. But I think we're still feeling the effects of COVID. And in particular, that decline as big as that is probably in RN to BSN. That is degree completion, which is online primarily. And a couple things could be going on there. Nurses themselves are exhausted. And certainly for a long period of time, we're just didn't have the time to be taking courses in their spare time, in their hypothetical spare time, as COVID worked its way through the system. I think most nurses are still very overworked because a lot of people left nursing. So the people are still working are very, very busy. Again, not able to go to classes in that area. I'm not aware that there's a substantial decline in enrollment, what I would call traditional nursing programs. You know, the entry-level bachelor's degree. And I don't think it's going to be easy to cure the nursing RN to BSN problem. There is, I think, a little silver lining there. I think we will see some people coming back for higher level nursing education who want to stay in the field, but don't want to be in the hospital facing all that work and all the really severe and traumatic experiences that they've had over the last 2 years. So I think they'll come back as nurse educators. And that could relieve one of the great bottlenecks in the nursing industry, which is having enough teachers. So I think there's a play there for graduate level nursing to get folks back who can then go on to teach the nurses that we certainly need in the workforce. If you have other questions, please feel free, post them. I wish we could just turn on the mics and have a conversation. That's probably impractical.
I can certainly do that for you, Bob, if you like.
Let's do it for a minute or two. If somebody's got a lawnmower running, we may have to go back to text. But last, congratulations. That's a great, that's a very timely degree, I think. And I'd love to know how it does over time. So all of you, I'm sure you're Zoom pros at this point. If you'd like to say something or have, chat with us, please unmute yourself and go ahead, or you can raise your hand, however you want to let us know that you'd like to speak. We're glad to have just a conversation here at the end for a few minutes. Anything that surprised all of you during the course of the presentation? Let me ask a more current and controversial question. How do you think artificial intelligence is going to affect your institutions, particularly your program offerings? Don't be shy. And I think you're all muted, so if anybody's speaking, we haven't heard you yet. I assume they can take themselves off mute, right, Marianne?
Yeah, they can.
Yes.
Well, now we know who's really still here. All right. With that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you all very much for joining us. I hope that you'll come back. We'll be having another webinar in a month for community colleges. So please feel free to join us. And don't forget, if you're trying to do program evaluation and management, there's a wonderful book out there, which is Stop, Start, or Grow, How to Do Data-Informed Academic Program Evaluation and Management. And it's really a guidebook, and I think it's very helpful and very practical for all of you who may need help with that. Thanks again, and we'll call it a day.